Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to How to Revitalize Your Career Post-COVID. My name is Jamie Lee. I'm based in New York. I'm a leadership and negotiation coach, and I help smart women who hate office politics get promoted and better paid without throwing anyone under the bus. But we feel like we're under a bigger bus, like a bus that's bigger than any of us right now. With the protests, with COVID, and there seems to be a second wave here in the States. We're in the thick of it, and I know when curveballs happen in our career, without all of the stuff that's happening, when stuff like this happens, one of the best ways to reframe, unexpected things happening is like, just consider it a plot twist. Like you're in the movie of your career and there's a plot twist. And it just happens so this particular plot twist is something that we're all experiencing at global scale. And every movie that I see, and I've been watching a lot of movies lately at home, there's always something that happens. It makes it seem like it's going to be impossible for the hero to persevere, get through, achieve their goal, and it always happens, every single movie. I just watched Eurovision. I don't know if you guys seen it yet on Netflix. It's hilarious. And just like the most outlandish things happen, like disastrous things happen. And yet, as you're watching it, you're feeling sympathy for the hero, but at the same time, the movie's not over yet. You know that the hero is going to persevere. You know that the hero is going to, there's going to be something that happens that helps the hero get to that ending at the end, right? So what if we can think about where we are in our careers, in our respective careers, whether you've been furloughed, whether you've been laid off, whether you've just been feeling kind of stuck or blue with everything going on, like, what if we can think of this as like the end of the movie? What if we just saw it as like a plot twist happen, right? And yet we can still keep that faith in our future selves, like who we are becoming. And at the end, when we look back on this chapter in our lives, we'd be like, yeah, we persevered that. We lived through that. We survived it. And because we survived it, we're better for it, right? And one thing that happens in every movie, every saga, is that the hero has a guide. Like whether it's their sidekick or like a wise old man or Yoda in Star Wars, like there is a guide, somebody who comes along and provides a perspective shift, provides a simple tool, like a weapon, a secret weapon, right? A guide who helps the hero persevere and get to the end of that story, right? And I feel like coaches, I'm totally biased. I'm 100% biased when I say this because I work as a coach and I have coaches here as panelists here. But I really do feel like coaches are guides. They can be the guides. Like you're the hero, right? No matter what you do, like coaches aren't gonna like help you, like they're not gonna carry you through the difficult things, but they're gonna provide some guidance and simple tools to help you be the hero of this story. And so that said, I'm so excited and honored to introduce Shyla Cash as well as Anke. I think you can see all of us on the screen here. I'm just gonna be totally honest, 100% transparency. Shyla is my coach. She coaches me. And so I feel like Shyla is my guide. And I am going to introduce Shyla. Shyla is a life and emotional health coach who specializes in family dysfunction, childhood trauma, high functioning depression, anxiety. Her own journey of healing from an abusive, neglectful childhood led her to helping others who have faced the same deep traumas. And the reason why, I really felt like I wanted to have Shyla on this discussion is because whether we know it or not, like we've all been exposed to trauma of 2020 with everything going on, yeah. And so I would love to hear from you, Shyla. Like, how can we, high functioning, ambitious driven professionals, how can we understand trauma in a way that can help us move through this?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Jamie. I'm happy to be here. And I think the simplest, most easy to digest definition of trauma is, as Dr. Peter Levine, who is a neuroscientist, describes it, is just too much, too soon, too fast, meaning that stimulus is coming in and there's an intense amount of, you know, our system, our whole system, our nervous system, our brain is responding to that stimulus. And if that stimulus is just it's coming at us too hard, too fast, too soon, then we're at risk of our system being unable to process it at that time. And what ends up happening is that flood of energy and hormones and emotional distress can actually stay with us after the event is over. And I think it's important to make the distinction between the event itself, what actually is happening, and how we perceive it to be happening. So that's sort of the space where trauma lives. There are things that happen that we can point to and say, yeah, I can see how that would be traumatizing, you know, for example, George Floyd's murder. But witnessing George Floyd's murder, it would also be something that is traumatic, even though it's not happening to us, because that's just a lot of stimulus and information to process. And so when we're working through trauma, it's about actually helping our system, our whole system, our emotional body, our brain, our nervous system, to actually be with those deeper sensations that we weren't able to process in the time and move through them so that we can create some space for something new and break out of the patterns, the coping patterns, and the adaptive responses that we've been using to cope.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear, you know, a little bit more about the adaptive responses, because just as you said, I think for so many of us, we feel like, you know, being quarantined and then, right, seeing George Floyd's death on TV and everything else, right, the protests and everything, it just feels like too much too soon. Even going back to work for some of us feels like too much too soon. Getting laid off, getting furloughed, like all of that. Yeah, and so help us understand, like how, where is that connection between trauma and the heightened anxiety women feel about their careers right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, COVID happening, a global pandemic, watching the news, this many deaths, this many cases, you know, wash your hands again. And there's sort of this frenetic energy to what we're consuming. Mm-hmm. And that sort of energetic dynamic is anxiety inducing, because when our system perceives a threat, and certainly a deadly disease that's killing hundreds of thousands of people is a threatening, right? On the deeper level, even before, you know, conscious thought, our brains and our nervous systems, Dr. Stephen Porges calls it our neuroception, which is the part of our body that actually determines what is safe and what is threatening below the level of consciousness, before it actually reaches our thoughts. So our system is constantly scanning our environment for danger. And so if we're suddenly hearing all of this, there's fear in the air, everybody's talking about it, we're terrified, that, which is understandable, you know, it's completely normal to be afraid in response to a threat. But what happens if we don't have a place to come down from that stressful response, then what ends up happening is we all sort of stay stuck in this anxious, heightened, hypervigilant, looking for danger, scanning the environment for danger at all times. And the important thing to recognize is that sometimes that anxiety, if we don't have bounce and resiliency and flow in our nervous systems and our brains, because maybe we didn't have the best foundations in early life, then what can happen is we don't actually know how to regulate, which is just a fancy word for saying help our systems come down from a threat response, because we have these threat responses in our bodies and our brains for a reason, to protect us, but we're not meant to stay in that heightened fear of death, we call it survival responses, for long periods of time. And so if we're going to work and we've got this fear on our minds about COVID-19, we've got all the racial tensions happening, and we've never been able to come down from that. We've never been able to ground, to reconnect to ourselves, to cry it out, to scream it out, to talk it out, and let all that messy sort of raw energy, survival energy that stays in our cells and in our systems come out, then we're going to be constantly feeling anxious, struggling with our sleep. Maybe our eating patterns are changing. And then maybe when you're at your desk, you might just not have the ability to really plow through your work like you're used to plowing through it, because there's all this other stuff going on under the surface. So it can even be a lot harder to do if you are still working, to do your daily tasks. And if you're not working, could be harder for you to, put your resume together, think about your goals, think clearly, because when we're in that anxious, traumatized survival state, we don't have as much access to that prefrontal cortex and all of that great executive functioning in our brains that helps us plan and organize. We might just want to sleep or eat ice cream, which is totally fine, right? But we want to be able to get ourselves through that so that we're not pushing against that threatening, anxious, or depressive response as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So help us is there something that we can do to regulate, right? To come down from like this heightened, restless place where you're basically burning yourself out. And something that I notice my clients and lots of smart, ambitious women do is like, we actually judge ourselves for feeling anxious. We judge ourselves for like not being able to do it the way we used to. And then it just kind of like heightens, like we add like self-judgment on top of anxiety, and then we just feel stuck and hopeless. So the thing that you mentioned, regulating our emotion, it sounds like so important and something that we just not been taught how to do. Another thing that I've heard is that from another psychiatrist is that it's really important for us to not only have regulated emotions, but to orient to now. And this is something that you've taught me, and I'd love for you to just kind of explain what that means, and like how, is there a simple way that the audience, like people who are watching this or watching the replay, can implement that to help them just, cope better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, orienting there's a practice of orienting that I'll kind of go over here, but to kind of explain the concept of orienting, really keep in mind that when we're traumatized, it's too much, too soon, too fast. And we're not able to fully complete the experience, the energy. A good example would be a near miss in the car. So we're driving along and maybe we almost hit a biker, or a biker flies in front of us, or we almost hit another car. And, almost everybody who drives can relate to this. You get this, it's like a rush. And that's your body's sort of signaling like, okay, there's something going on. We need to be alert. We need to pay attention. And what most of us do is we would just, whoa, that happened. Wow. And we would just keep driving. But we might notice that we feel shaky for the rest of the day. We feel a little bit off. We feel a little bit off kilter. We're not able to access our thinking as much. Maybe we aren't able to hold eye contact as long with our spouse, or something's just a little bit off throughout the day. That's an example of sort of like a small traumatic incident where there was all this rush of energy. It was just too much, too soon, too fast. It came out of nowhere, but we kind of plowed through it. We just kept driving along and kept going on our day. With healing and with just sort of paying attention to our systems and orienting, what we would want to do is that near miss happens, and then we would stop the car, we would pull over, and just take a second to orient again. Rather than keep driving and just kind of push the response down, the survival response down, we want to just pull over and just take a moment and look around, recognize that we're safe, get connected and embodied again, recognize what's going on in our internal environment. Are we trembling? Do we kind of maybe need a little bit of a release of tears? Do we need to just take some deep breaths? And just wait for our systems to settle. Similarly, with orienting, you may not have had a near miss recently, or you may not have had something happen in that second or that moment. But if we've had tons of these near miss situations, all kinds of situations where we were thrown off kilter, it was too much, too soon, too fast, but maybe we didn't have parents who knew these skills of really emotional attunement and regulation, so they didn't help us orient, help us kind of come back to a baseline, and we stayed stuck up in that stress response. Then what happens is we can these things sort of build up. They build up in our physiology, in our systems, in our brains. And so rather than try and go looking for all the different traumas that may have happened to us and go searching for, different memories, we can use the practice of orienting to right now to just notice what's happening with our bodies in the present, and in a safe, gentle way, start to release some of that pent-up energy that's causing us to struggle maybe with depression or anxiety or, perfectionism, shame, like you said, that overactive inner critic that's saying, well, why are you so tired? Why can't you just get over it? Come on, we got to get going, move on. You got to put your resume out there. You got to get going. You got to put food on the table, right? So orienting, that's the simple sort of concept of it, is just coming back to right now. But the practice of orienting that was created by Dr. Peter Levine, who's the founder of somatic experiencing, is a practice of engaging our brainstem, which is the spot right at the back of your head, where your neck meets your head, where your brainstem is, that connects your brain to your spine. And your brainstem is your most primal, primitive, survival-oriented part of your brain. And so we want to engage that overactive brainstem and help it to send messages of safety to our nervous system. So to do that, to orient, you just want to notice where you are. And you can even do this right now if you're watching this in the audience. Just look around, notice where you are. And by looking around and slowly moving your neck, you're engaging that brainstem. And when you're looking around, you're also engaging the nerves in the eyes and in the face, and you're just noticing what's going on. And you're noticing where you are. And by doing that, we can use our external environment to help us pay attention to what's happening within the body. So when your eyes find something that they want to just sit on and sort of look at gently, no strain, no pushing, just looking. As you look, you can start to ask yourself, what is happening in my body? And as I do that, I can sense there's a little bit of tension in my thighs, a little bit of tension in my neck. I'm alert. My sympathetic system is, alert. I'm presenting, I'm speaking in a public forum. And then I can notice the areas that aren't so tense, like my hands, relaxed, my face, my lips, they're just kind of sitting there. And so by moving back and forth through these spaces in our bodies that are tense or uncomfortable, or may be extremely uncomfortable if there's a lot of trauma there, and moving back and forth to the places that are really tense and really uncomfortable, and then finding those pockets or those spaces in the body that aren't uncomfortable, that aren't tense, that are open, loose, relaxed. We start to find inner resources within our own systems and our own bodies, which want to release this chronic stress, and use that as a way to start to feel safe, to release some of this pent-up stuff that's in our systems, and feel grounded and feel connected and embodied.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for that. I think that's so powerful, because when we worry about getting it right, doing it right, we're in the future. We're not right here, which is home, connected to the internet. having a conversation, totally safe, contained within these walls.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear, there is a big thunderstorm here in New York. There's like lightning. So if you see flashes on my face, that's what it is. But still, like, you know, I'm safe right now. And so like orienting now is like, yeah, it's like coming back to the
Connecting
now.
to the body. Yes.
Right. Connecting to the body. And then this helps you process the emotion that you experience so that we can get to what we're going to discuss next with Anke, which is like, okay, now how do we move forward? So thank you so much for that, Shyla. And those of you who have questions for Shyla, after we speak with Anke, we're going to open the floor up for questions. So you can type them into the Q&A box. Okay, so thank you. And Anke Docherty is a life and career coach who helps moms return to work after a career break to have children. She helps them be confident and guilt-free about returning to work and to find exactly the job and the pay they want. And at the same time, she is an HR director at a multinational construction company, and she knows what recruiters, hiring managers, and HR professionals are looking for. So I think you're going to help add so much value in this discussion. So we have women here who unexpectedly got furloughed or lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So one question that I get asked sometimes is, how do you address this in your job application? When you like start applying to new jobs, how do you talk about or describe what had happened in a way that doesn't set you back? So Anke, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, also from my side, welcome everybody. Thanks so much, Jamie, for having me here. It's a big pleasure to be on your webinar. Okay, I think the one and only answer here is really honesty, okay? It sounds a bit funny, but I think when we think about a job application and we think about what an employer wants to hear, you know, there's not really magic behind it, right? We just want to see in the end that people can do their job. You see, and when we receive an application, especially nowadays, it's just normal that some people get furloughed, you know, that some people, lost their job. There's nothing too special about it. The problem here is what prevents a lot of people from doing so or being honest is their mindset, yeah, because they have so much going on in the background where they think, oh my God, what a shame, this shouldn't have happened, why me, why not others, and so on. So you have so much things going on in the background of your mind so that it prevents you from A, going really all in your job search, yeah, and from B, then presenting it properly. You know, so I see it so many times with clients. They come up with all sorts of questions like, how do I put this on my CV? How do I talk about it? When should I address it? You know, and my answer is always, well, just go in there with an open mind, have a conversation. You know, an interview is nothing else than a conversation, okay? And then just address it as and when it comes up. So yeah, but as I said earlier, the mindset is really important. So before we search for a job, I would recommend everybody to really be clear on how they feel about this gap in their CV, as some people call it, you know, how they feel about being furloughed, how they feel about having lost their job, and really rewrite their story, yeah? So that it's not the victim that kind of lost their job, but it's like, yeah, hey, that happened, you know, what can I get out of it and how can I move on? So that's really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for addressing that. So what I'm hearing is that from the employer's perspective, they don't see you getting furloughed or laid off as like a detriment. It doesn't say something negative about you per se. Like, because I think, as you're saying, when we don't get clean, right? When we don't really get organized in how we want to think about it, sometimes like people want to think, oh, it's because I did something wrong or there was something wrong with me. And what I'm hearing from you, Anke, is that no, employers are not necessarily going to think that when they see a gap or when you just address honestly and factually, you lost your job because of the COVID reductions.
Yeah, correct. I mean, yes, I'm not denying it. There may be some employers which are like, don't really want that, you know, especially when I have other applicants in the row that, for example, don't have that gap. However, then the question is, do you really want to work for such employer in the first place, you know? So, and you can never please everybody, regardless of how your CV looks. Some employers may like it, some won't, and that's fine.
Excellent. So, and then there are women who just feel, because of the heightened anxiety that Shyla and I discussed earlier, like we're seeing all the news about the economic impact, and then some women are just worried. They have jobs and they're just worried that something bad is going to happen, or they feel like the shoe is going to drop and they might lose their jobs. And so, you work in HR, and so I'd love to know, like, do you have a word of advice for people who just feel so anxious and worried?
Well, my first question to them would be, why are you actually worried? What happened that makes you worried, And I think Shyla already made a few good points here with orienting yourself, to really calm down and come back and just say, okay, I have my job. I haven't lost it. It's here. I'm sitting in my office. I'm sitting at home, working from home. Everything is fine. Right? So again, a lot of it is about mindset, because sometimes through watching the news, Shyla explained it beautifully. Yeah, we watch the news, we hear all these things, we go out on the street, suddenly we see everyone with a mask. So our mind starts spinning and we come up with all sorts of things that actually, yes, it's there, but it has nothing to do in this moment with me losing my job or not. Yeah. So this is the first thing. So a lot about mindset. And the other thing is, I guess with working from home, a lot of us struggle also a little bit, so I would say communication is really important, especially in that time, okay, that we communicate well, that we try to avoid emails anyways, but especially nowadays, that we sometimes speak to each other, and that we really think how we can add value in our role in this specific moment in time. Again, coming back to the present, like, what does my company need right now? What does my boss need right now? What does my department need right now? What does my team need? And to really think along those lines.
I love it. And that's a great way to actually make yourself even more secure. You're secure now, but if you keep adding value, keep asking yourself, how can I add value? Then you become more valuable in that role. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So sometimes people ask me about resumes. Like, sometimes people ask me about, like, especially those of us who have been let go and, like, they haven't had to write a resume in a long time. And so people think, oh, it's the first thing I have to do. I have to revamp my resume, right? So from the candidate screening process that you've been through, like, what are employers actually looking for in resumes? Like, is there a good way to do it? Is there a bad way to do it?
Well, see, again, good and bad way is a bit judgmental. Yes, there's ways which are a bit better than others. Okay. Yeah. So for example, when I have a CV, I don't like to see an 8-page document. Yeah, it's just too long. Some people, they have so much experience and they want to write everything, but if it gets too long, then it's just not ideal. Yeah, because I have so many CVs, and when I screen, I don't want to go through 8 pages in detail. So it should be a little bit shorter, maybe 2-3 pages, depending on your experience. It should highlight your personal details, whatever you put on there, the companies you've worked for, the roles you had, and especially achievements that you had in each role. I find that really important. So many candidates just put job descriptions, and that's great. But I also want to see what you as a person have achieved in that specific role, in that specific company, because this is what I'm interested in. Right? So this is really important. Now, what exact format you have, what color scheme, what in which order you put it, I think it differs a bit from country to country. Sometimes people should put a photo and other times they don't. It really depends where you are. So you need to see what is kind of the customs in your country. But other than that, like I said, your achievements, and to really point it out, that's really, really important. Yeah. Also, when you apply for bigger companies, most probably your CV will be screened not by a person straight away, but by a so-called ATS system, application tracking system, okay, which is a system that looks for specific keywords. Okay, so unless you meet those keywords, which are generally somehow linked to the job description, then you will probably, fall through that system. Or sometimes it can also happen when you have a break in your CV. Some systems scan for that, and if they see a gap, then they filter you out. So you need to kind of find a few alternative methods of bypassing those systems. Yeah.
And that's such great insight. What are some effective ways to bypass the ATS, automatic, what was it?
Yeah, application tracking system.
Application tracking system. Like, I am of the opinion that the best way to get better paying jobs or to move your career is really through conversations, like networking, right? People who know people get hired. Or like, it depends who knows what you know, who knows what you're capable of, right? So, if, from HR, have you seen people bypass ATS through direct connections?
Yeah, people do that, and again, it depends how you do it. Sometimes you can contact people on LinkedIn, or you just network in general. You have conversations, as you said. That's really the most important thing. It's not just every time you're out there, you're looking for a job. I mean, even if you are, but don't show it. Interact with people, give value. Engage in discussions that concern your area of work, for example. Make comments, make suggestions, put yourself out there. Or if you address somebody directly, send a message, or even things like send a voice message. LinkedIn, for example, has the possibility to send voice messages as well, And the other day I received a voice message from a candidate. I was like, hey, that's different, It then didn't change anything, but it just made that person stay in my mind, for example, And constantly, speak to people and just be out there, and then something will happen at some point.
Love it. So is that effective when people write you, like send you their resume or application directly? Do you find that it is effective for the candidate?
For the candidate, I'm not sure. I mean, it depends, So sometimes it depends what I see when the email pops up. Okay. If it's just like looking for a job, or do you have any vacancy? I'm like, no. Okay. But if somebody says something catchy, or something that catches my eye in one way or another, and it's different from job to job, from company to company, once a candidate wrote something in a finance role, and he said, hey, what would you think if I could reduce, your expenses by X amount or something, something like this, where I thought, that's different. We didn't still have a role in this point, but it's just a different approach, which will make you stand out from all the others.
Love it. Love it. It's great marketing. Like, he was marketing himself, like saying, hey, maybe this is a way I can help add value to your organization. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, Anke. I want to open the floor up to questions. So if you have any questions for either Anke or Shyla, or for me, you can look at the UI, the Zoom UI. There is like a chat, like a bubble, and it says Q&A. So you can click on that and then type in your questions for us. Yeah. And for me, I just want to share what I have seen like really effective at this time with my clients who are transitioning in their careers, who are, making progress with everything going on, is that they do like certain things really well. The first thing they do really well is they set specific and measurable goals. Right? I have a client who is working on building a side business. Like she wants to build an education company, as she's working full time, as she's going to school. She's very ambitious, and it's doable if you just, get really specific on what that goal is. And then you define like, how can I get there very specifically? And then she identified like what she is in control of, which is initiating conversations with as many people as possible on the topic of her goal. And so she broke it down. She wants to have 100 conversations. And then within a few weeks, she identified like 50 people who's already in her network, right? And so then even when you're working from home, even when you're in quarantine, you can do that. You can have conversations. And she's making a lot of progress towards that. And through these conversations, she's gaining clarity, and she's also like growing her desire for what she wants to do. So, okay, so we have some questions here. Kristen asks, can you speak a bit about how to deal with pay cuts? Do I have any room to negotiate? Okay. So, Kristen, I just want to let you know, I am going to have a separate webinar all about negotiation in 2 weeks. And so I'll go deeper into the topic of negotiation. But the short answer from my perspective to you is that like, it depends. Because it depends on how your employer, how their business has been impacted, right? If your business is in, I don't know, consumer goods or hospitality, like the prospect right now, let's be like brutally honest, it's not looking, I mean, there's definitely room for improvement, right? And some companies are opening back services, but it's going to be slow. It's not going to immediately go back to the way it was. That means that revenue growth isn't going to be immediately what it was either, right? And so if they don't have revenue, they may not be able to, give you that 100% pay immediately. So you got to do your own research about where the company is, what the situation is like. If you have a relationship with people in finance, maybe take them to like have a virtual chat with them, ask them, so that you can get a feel for what is possible within your organization. Like you want to have nuanced information about what really is negotiable, and then decide from there. But of course you can ask them. Of course you can ask them, your employer, and say, hey, when do you think would be a good time for us to revisit bringing me back to 100% of what I was paid before all of this? Like when do you suppose that timeline would look like? And honestly, I might say, we don't know. We're trying to figure it out on ourselves right now, but you will have more leverage to negotiate that if you can articulate how you are helping them solve this problem in a proactive way. How you are proactively adding value to help reduce costs, bring more revenue. If you can make an argument around that, it's going to help you and give you more leverage in that conversation. But I also want to check in with Anke. Do you have any suggestions or additional thoughts about like how do you have any room to negotiate if you had to take a pay cut?
Yeah, I think, Jamie, you answered it quite well already. I mean, the reason generally for giving people pay cuts is because the company is going through serious financial trouble. Yeah, they need to cut costs, they need to watch costs, they need to achieve budgets, etc. So in general, in this particular point, it's probably the wrong time to really address this, right? Unless you are in a function where you can actively help to contribute to bring money in. Okay, so for example, sometimes, some people in finance may be able to do that, revenue controllers, credit controllers who collect the money, or maybe salespeople who bring in certain sales, etc. Then you can directly see a relation, to the outcome, right? Which is the bottom line. The bottom line is really what counts. So I would say, unless you're in such a function, maybe wait a little bit, but continue to show your value, continue to do your job as if you would be paid in full or even more, just show it, because then you have a really strong base later on to potentially negotiate your pay.
Love it. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So Anonymous asks, can Anke give some tips to moms returning to the workforce after a long break and they want to transition to a new field?
Okay. I guess the first question for me to Anonymous would be, okay, do you already know what you want to do? Yeah, this is generally step one, because sometimes, yes, when moms have a career break, priorities change. Sometimes they need more flexibility, etc. So the question is, are you already clear on that part? Yeah. Once you're clear on that part, you can then just start a normal, regular job search. Yeah. I can also read a little bit between the lines that maybe you're asking whether you're really on the same level than others. Yeah, if you had a different job before, if you want to do something completely different. And again, an employer generally is interested in how you can help them and what you can do. So if this is the case that you can then argue, there's no problem. Yeah. So also when you were in a career break for a long time, you know, so many people forget that they develop really good skills, you know, things like organization skills, time management skills, you know, and it's not just phrases. I mean, when you have kids and later on then return to the workforce, you must be really good at that. Otherwise, you don't get it done. So there's also skills that you learn and that could be transferable into a new role. So that would also be something worth exploring.
I love that. It's like you get to be CEO, right, of a household with very little tiny humans.
Yeah.
Who are probably even more difficult to manage than actually fully grown humans. So yeah, there's definitely transferable skills that can help you transition to what you want to do. But and what I'm hearing is that, like, first you got to decide.
Yeah, you need to decide what you want, you know, and be really specific in everything. Like, you know, what companies do you want to work for? What industry? What sort of job? What's the hours you want to work? Do you want to work part-time, full-time? You know, and there's so many things, and there's no right answer, right? It's just really good to have clarity, because then you can start a targeted search and don't just apply to anything you come across, because then it becomes wishy-washy, you know, and you cannot bring your value across. So be really clear on what you want first.
I love it. So one thing I just want to add to that is, like, even if you have so many ideas, if, like, because I know a lot of smart women, we have so many ideas and we're like, but we want to do it all at once. Why can't we do it all? So my advice is just, like, pick one that you think would really excite you, that you would be really happy in, and then just, like, commit maybe just a chunk of time, maybe a whole month, and just go figure out, like, or talk to as many people as possible who are doing that one specific thing, or ask for opportunities that would, you know, help you do that one specific thing. Just be committed, even if just for, like, a short period of time, and just go all in on trying to make that a reality. And then after a month, you could be like, well, you know what? After doing all this conversation and research, I've decided it's not really a good fit. Then you can change your mind. But I think it really helps to just be, like, really specific, focused on one thing at a time. So thanks for that. Okay, and I think this question, I would love to hear from both Shyla and Anke. Anonymous asks, what advice do you have for someone in a post-layoff work environment where prove your worth is more important than ever? So, and at the same time, we're still with COVID, kids at home, diminished capacity. So what I read from this question is that this person, Anonymous, is feeling a lot of pressure, right? The pressure and the stress that, like, she has to prove her worth in the work environment, you know, after experiencing something rather traumatic, like you lose your coworkers in the workplace. And so it sounds like it's kind of overwhelming and stressful to just deal with everything that is going on. So Shyla, do you have any thoughts on somebody who feels like she's pressured to, like, prove her worth?
For sure. I think you already touched on it a little bit, Jamie, around, you know, it is a little bit traumatic because then everybody's on guard. And then we were talking earlier about how our systems, our physiological systems, respond to threat. So everybody's probably tense. And I think when it comes to proving your worth, it may be too that, you know, you're probably thinking about, well, am I next? Is my work good enough? And we want to be careful from coupling the quality of your work with your worth as a human being. They're separate, right? So your work can be good or bad. That doesn't mean that you as a human being are good or bad. And that's wonderful, because if your work is bad, but you're not bad, then you can improve the quality of your work. I'm not saying you're not bad, that you're bad. But what I'm saying is it's okay to give yourself a little bit of mercy and compassion if one day you're just not on, you're not feeling on. And then there's that added shame of, like, okay, but there was just these layoffs and now I'm not on, and it could be me. And that's just going to further sort of devolve your sense of autonomy in your workplace, your sense of self in the workplace, and you're going to start to feel like you're lagging behind. So the first thing I would say is actually, you're probably thinking about work a lot when you're not at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing I would say is when you're not at work, really practicing practices that make you feel connected, that make you feel embodied, that make you feel safe and detached from work. Because what the research and the science has shown is that when we feel safe, we're more able to be creative, to be spontaneous, to be innovative. And that's, I'm sure Anke can testify to this, that's super important to employers. They want to see that you're not rigid, that you can flow with changes, that you can be adaptable, that you're thinking on your feet, that you're creating new opportunities for advancements and change in the company. And it's really hard to access that if we're sort of stuck in this vortex of, am I next? Am I next? And I know it's easier said than done, especially having the kiddos at home where you're busy at work, you're busy with the kids. But what I would say is some simple self-care tips. Like, you don't have to like have 2 hours and have like a green tea and a bath and make it like Instagram worthy. But if your kids are at home and you're spending time with your kids, really just spend that time with your kids. Allow that time to be time with your kids. Take it in. Enjoy it as much as possible. And then those 3 minutes where you're before bed, the kids are in bed and you're sitting in your bed, instead of just kind of going right to sleep or using the TV to fall asleep, really take that time to connect. Maybe use some self-touch, put your hand on your heart and on your forehead and just notice how you're feeling. Is your breath short? Are you feeling really anxious? And see if you can maybe, instead of avoiding that feeling or running away from that feeling, see if you can maybe just feel it a little bit deeper, process it a little bit, because that's what's going to give you the space to be that employee that is able to kind of show up in the workplace and just, really wow your employers. So I hope that helps.
Love it. That's so good. Thank you. Anke, since you help moms with kids at home, I would love to hear, do you have any advice for Anonymous who feels she's got to prove her worth and she's got to deal with the kids at home and everything else?
Yeah, I think Shyla has already covered the prove your worth part quite well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. As she said, it's really important to detach yourself. There's you as a person and your work. Okay. And if you start to feel the need to prove your worth, again, my question would be, what changed from before? Do you feel you need to prove your worth even more because you cannot sit every second in front of your computer, or what? Like, how did this come up would be my first question. Yeah. Now, in terms of having kids at home, a friend of mine who also works in HR said the other day, her son has met pretty much anybody of her colleagues during lockdown, because he keeps on running into the room and participating in conferences and things like this, And I think we just need to put our expectations down a little bit, when we are at home, especially also with kids and small kids. It will not happen that we sit there for 8 or how many hours and that we work uninterrupted like we are in the office. It just doesn't happen. You are at home, you are in your space. Some people even don't have a separate room, so they may sit in the living room, so just make the best out of what you have, and also if you have some family commitments, like sometimes you need to maybe bring the kids somewhere or you need to entertain them for a while. Also a client of mine, he had a 2-year-old daughter, and he said, I don't know what to do with her. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do with her? Because you cannot not tell a 2-year-old to stay, I don't know, in her room for a few hours. It just doesn't work. So I think we need to accept what we have and we need to work around it. Okay. Now, having said this, we still need to do some work. So we need to get creative, make some arrangements, hopefully the people who have kids have some sort of partner. Maybe you can share responsibilities, maybe you can work for an hour while your partner watches the kid, especially if the kid's small. And then after that, it's your turn. Maybe you just don't sit all the time in front of your computer. Mostly there are also tasks which you can do early in the morning or late at night, when the kids are in bed or something. So you just need to shuffle your schedule around a little bit. And most importantly, again, communicate to your employer. And I would say probably 95% of employers do understand, do appreciate. And once they know when you are available and when you aren't, then it's totally fine. Yeah. And like I said, when the child runs into the camera, okay, I would say, come say hi. It's really, it's not a big deal. It's again, what we make out of it, or what do we make it mean in our mind. And 99% of the time is so much bigger than what it actually is.
I love it. Thank you so much for that. So I just want to add two things. One, I coached a client who, similar to Anke was saying, she had her kid like barge into the Zoom conversations, and she had the thought, like the brain just offered up this thought that like she wasn't being professional, that other people wouldn't do this, and so this is like setting her behind. But then we just questioned that. We just questioned the thought, because thinking that she was being set back by her own child was making her feel disempowered, frustrated, kind of embarrassed, right? And so then when she felt that way, she was like shutting down in the meeting and not really being proactively engaged in the conversation, that in a way that she knows she could be, right? And so we just questioned the thought that like this shouldn't be happening. And we arrived at like, what if the kid coming into the room is not a problem? Like she can have the kid and she can still show up and she can still engage and she can still impress her colleagues. And in fact, like it's possible that when her colleagues see her with the kid in the room, like they're like impressed. They're like, she has a kid and she's doing this, She's able to manage her family and manage her work at the same time. Some people like me who don't have children would be like, wow, how does she do it all? So it's possible that what you think is a weakness, for some others, it's like totally a strength. And based on that, like the thing that I'm really helping my clients do, through this time and all times, is like helping clients be proud on purpose. Like this is a skill that we women are not taught how to do on purpose. Like on purpose, we can be proud of showing up. We can be proud of doing our jobs. We can be proud of still having a job, even after pay cut, even after people have been laid off or furloughed, or even if you've gotten furloughed. Like I have clients who got new jobs, like right off, they got furloughed and they got hired right away, So you can be proud of all of it. Like you can give yourself credit. Right? Like when you think I have to prove my worth, it's like you see your worth as like lacking. But so what can help is you start building belief in your worth on purpose. You could be like, well, you know what? I am showing up. Even if I'm not doing it perfectly, I'm doing my best. Even with all of this going on, even with, experiencing trauma, I'm showing up to a webinar and trying to learn how I can revitalize my career. I mean, you can be proud of that. You can be proud of like, wow, I'm so committed. I'm like paying attention, taking notes so that I can do better in my job and help my family and have, positive impact. Like your intentions are good. So you can be proud of your intentions, right? And so one other thing that I want to add, Shyla explained this so beautifully. Like we have a misconception of what it means to feel an emotion. Like so many of my clients are frustrated by office politics that still happen in virtual offices, right? They're still frustrated by what's happening, and they feel like, I can't be frustrated. Because if I'm frustrated, it means that I'm mad at somebody, and it means that like our relationship is at risk. It means that I'm hurting somebody. But listen, you being frustrated doesn't hurt anyone. But you suppressing and not allowing yourself to feel frustrated, sad, or whatever you feel, it only hurts you, right? And so when Shyla says like you really like feel into that emotion, what she means is like you label that emotion, you locate it in the body. Like I feel like when I feel inadequate, I feel like a pang in my heart, right? And I could identify it, I could like describe it, I could breathe into it and not make it mean that something has gone wrong, not make it mean that I shouldn't be feeling this, not make it mean like somebody else is for blame, but just like being with that emotion, like describing it, being with it and breathing through it. And then you just pay attention to it. And you do this for just like a minute or two, and you start feeling relief. You start feeling just a tiny, tiny bit differently. Maybe just like a tiny bit of less sad, less angry, less frustrated, but that is your power. Like you can control that. And that's something that I help my clients do. And I just want to thank Anke and Shyla for spending time with us, answering these questions. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And then I'm going to, okay, I kind of have a messy screen right now, but I'm going to figure this out. Okay. So I'm going to share with everyone where people can find Shyla and where people can find Anke online. So here's where Shyla Cash, here's where you can find her online. Is that right? Let me know if I made a mistake here. Okay. Okay, Docherty, and here's where you can find Anke. Okay, all these places. All right, and of course, you can find me here. And I hope you found this useful. Please, follow Shyla, follow Anke. And if you have any other questions for me, you know how to reach me. You're probably on my newsletter or in my social media feed. So thank you. Any last words before we wrap up from either Anke or Shyla?
It was great. I really loved being here, and I loved all the insights that Anke shared and that you shared as well, Jamie. I think it was awesome. I really enjoyed it and appreciate you having me on.
You're most welcome. Anke, anything from you?
Yeah, same for me. Thank you very much to both of you. It was good to have your insights as well. It was good to see some people who, who want to take action. That was really nice to see. And I would just tell everybody, next time you feel really doubtful about something, just question your thoughts for a moment.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we have a question or, okay, you're most welcome, Kristen. You're most welcome, Karen or Karen. I will share these notes and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and evening. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.